Ella, welcome. I am still just getting going here. I literally just hit go. So, um, got some mixed stuff. I can't remember. My camera's over here. Shuffling shit around. I get all screwed up. So, first, welcome to Thursday Night Live with Remy. Normally mix the topics, something current, something I've had planned, whatever people come up with for questions. There's no fixed itinerary. But since normally I'm talking to myself and posting it later, it is what it is. And I apologize for the fact that that camera is very low. If I sit up very straight and tall, it's a little better. But my back is very tired right now. So first, let's talk about Ukraine and the fact that I was freaking right. We are literally watching a case study for professionalism in the military, or really the consequences of not having it at the small unit, individual soldier level. Because when your soldiers are unmotivated, trained in basically the 1960s or 70s style, in the sense that like their style trained, not what they're trained in, but how you train them, and really don't have a whole lot of real world experience, even if your officers kind of do, yeah, you're gonna suck. Your performance in the field when not doing it to a plan that everybody follows, including the enemy, is gonna suck. And over time, they will improve because the ones who survive, assuming a unit survives contact and most of the people in it survive, and institutional knowledge is maintained, they will slowly improve. But if you lose out of a squad, a quarter or a half, and that was your squad that was actually engaged. Because remember, this isn't the kind of war where there's like a mass wave of attacks. If you're trying to go over a bridge, just a little overpass on a highway, and a squad makes the attack, a platoon, say, there's some fire support guys, but a squad is the ones actually going over. They make it, they don't make it, they get part way and retreat, they experience something, right? And along the way, they learn what worked, what didn't. They learn what the enemy is going to do, how the enemy might respond. They just get used to the fact that bullets are flying by. And the problem is, if you lose 10%, 20% of your forces that have that experience each time, you don't actually gain anything. It's a net zero. Because one guy on the team has some experience. He's the guy who's not going to be stupid enough to be up front. He's probably just not going to want to talk to you other, new guys. And you're not going to learn anything from him, particularly not in this kind of situation. You may learn from him 6 months later when you're doing training and he says, well, this is what really was going on. But in the Russian military, he's not going to speak up. He's probably going to be out of the military in 6 months or a year, and he doesn't want to get killed. If the attack is going this badly and he speaks up and he is not politically connected, he might wind up dead. Not from Ukrainians, but from his own officers, his own senior officers, the KGB or NKVD or whatever the frick they're calling it. But long term, this is how you learn. And the U.S. military has literally, we made a science of this. Now, how well it works on a given unit is always up for grabs. But after Vietnam, we basically learned that you need to actually pass on this knowledge, not just informally in a unit, but institutionally. That you send units for organized training and they talk about it. This is what really worked. You have trainers that have really been there and done that and are talking about what really works, not the theory. They're saying, hey, this is how we want to respond. This is what we want to try. But here's reality. And if you don't train that way, if you don't train high stress, dynamic environments, if you don't have shoot houses and then you've got to actually go clear houses, that's a steep learning curve. That's a real rough. So, we're seeing how it doesn't work. We're also seeing the importance of owning the airspace. This is something that the US and to some extent Europe has understood since World War II. If you do not absolutely control the airspace you are fighting in, it's a much higher risk environment. Because if you do control it, you can say, hey, we need air support for this attack. Send some fighter bombers, send a helicopter or two. You can send in these options and they have a lot more flexibility, a lot more freedom to operate. If you don't have full control of that airspace, your helicopters probably can't survive. They're going to have to be very careful. Your aircraft, you lose a percentage, maybe too high a percentage. Maybe your Air Force goes, you know what, we can't support that attack. We're supporting this one over here, and we just don't have that many aircraft left. We can't afford to split them up and lose two at each and not have enough force at each location. Particularly when you have a war that has gone on much longer than I'm sure Russia expected in terms of the actual assaulting. Aircraft need maintenance. Aircraft go down for service. Engines need torn down. Avionics have a limited lifespan. Your radars, your fire control systems, they need service. They only get so many hours on their clocks before they need service. And you can push that off. You can delay that. You can do the Israeli model where they're like, there's no warning signs. There's no, red lights. Screw it. Send it back out. Refuel it. New weapons, go. But even the Israelis said, hey, at some point, we got to pull that off the line, do a service back in line. And Russian tanks, Russian infantry carriers, Russian aircraft, Russian anti-aircraft vehicles, all these systems are having problems, both environmentally, and they're not holding up. And that's not even a fault of the equipment. You're not saying that this equipment is faulty. It's just the reality. If you are the attacker, it's very difficult to go, okay, we need to pause to service this equipment because this is all we have in this location. And we have to not attack for 2 days while we service it. Great. In the meantime, your defenders are servicing their equipment. They're getting sleep. They're rotating people in and out. They have a lot more flexibility because they're on the inside. They're the defender. So, anything that gets damaged, you're operating out of forward bases for the Russians. You're not operating from their home bases. Do you have the full service equipment? Can you tear down an engine? If you have a problem, how much can you fix on site versus we're down an aircraft for a couple of days when it goes back, somewhere else to get serviced? That adds up. First couple of days, first 3 or 4 days, no problem. 5, 6, 7 days, now you've got a problem. So what else we got? We've seen their vehicles, their wheeled vehicles, stuck in the mud, needing repairs. Do you have the vehicles to pull it out of the mud? I mean, that's a big truck, right? Is there a tank nearby? Do you have the tow straps, or were those sold or scrapped or thrown out or whatever? Because remember, the Russian military is not a professional army. They're trying. They're working on it. This is something Putin has been working on for almost 20 years. But a lot of those units, I would bet a quarter of their actual supplies, their small equipment, their tools, their tow straps, their, you know, various spare parts gone. Either they used it and it was a single use item, and somebody just never reported it, and nobody did an inventory. Whatever it is, these are failures of this kind of system for a government, for a military. I mean, our military loves to bitch about the paperwork, about the maintenance records, all these things, but they are what differentiate you from what we're seeing out of Russia, from third world countries. It's penny bullshit. It's annoying. It's stupid, but it means that when you go into combat, your equipment works, at least as much of it as you can. That you have spare parts available. That the wrench you need to repair something is where it's supposed to be. If your vehicle is supposed to have that wrench in a particular spot, yeah, it was annoying doing an inventory and going, check, wrench in the right spot. And, your crew chief or whoever comes by later and goes, yep, wrench is actually there. These things add up to a more effective force. And we're seeing the difference because the Ukrainian army is more of a professional army. They're not Western in the sense that they're like the U.S. Army or the British Army or anything like that, but they're closer to that than the Russian current version. And I mean, we're seeing the results. We're also seeing the results of real world use of a lot of the weaponry that was theoretical. They had built it, they had tested it in formal testing, but not in actual service. It had never been, hey, we've got a Russian soldier actually on the attack trying to use this thing. And, you're not using it on a pre-planned range with a planned out target that is appropriate for the weapon. He's using an anti-tank missile on a bridge rebutment because there's, an anti-tank team hiding behind it. Does it work? Meanwhile, the U.S. weapons, and don't get me wrong, Ukraine uses a lot of communist bloc weapons, for lack of a better term, but they also have a lot of U.S.-made weapons or Western weapons, particularly a lot of the higher tech stuff. Their rifles, very often Eastern European. Anti-tank missiles, you got a mix, but a lot of them are U.S.-oriented. So just in general, there's this difference because we've used ours. We've been at, for lack of a better term, because it is war, but it isn't the same kind of war, but we have been actively fighting for decades. And how does a Javelin missile work in various situations? Well, we know. And version 1, the first thing that came out of the factory, well, okay. And then there was iteration on iteration on iteration, even if it's little tiny stuff, even if it's as simple as knowing that, hey, on this kind of target, use this mode. I know you think you should be using that other mode, use this mode. Use this vision system on the sighting system. These things are knowledge learned the hard way. Our soldiers paid in blood to figure these out and report back. And when we dropped them off in Ukraine, a lot of that knowledge got passed along. And it shows. We are seeing the anti-tank defenses for Ukraine massively better than I'm sure the Russians were expecting. Because if they weren't, this would be over. Like if the Russian armor could just go where it wanted and do what it wanted, this would be long over. But it isn't. I think we're going to see that a lot of the Russian equipment really doesn't hold up as well, and it doesn't work as well in real world results as the Russians thought. Because are you going to tell Putin that that weapon he paid you, $1 billion to develop really doesn't work as well as he wanted? No, you're going to keep your head intact. You're not going to get shot. You're going to make sure that that test goes the way you want. And if that requires a little C4 in the dummy tank that you're shooting, you put some C4 in the dummy tank you're going to shoot. So, because right now we're looking at all these pieces of equipment, modern equipment, on what amounts to a World War II style battlefield, and things that only work in a specific scenario, this pre-planned battle that you thought you were going to have. If that's all they can do, if they only work the way the doctrine said we're going to use them, now you got a problem. So we'll see. I do think, on that note, it is hysterical. Let me scroll my notes here. It is hysterical. The Russians are now on the reverse of their situation when Operation Barbarossa kicked off from the Nazis. German troops are charging through the first part of Russia, knocking out early defensive line after defensive line after defensive line. And then they get bogged down, and defenders start chewing them up in these, multi-layer defenses in the cities, defensive rings, and mud and snow and bad weather and equipment wearing out because they were overextended and supply lines got too long and supplies ran out and your equipment wasn't designed for this environment and your troops didn't have winter equipment, winter clothes and boots and gloves and hats. And well, now we're seeing this in reverse, right? The Russians are trying to invade another country in a not great time of year. And they're running into these problems. They're literally doing this from the Nazi side. And I'm not calling them Nazis. The scenario is that they flipped it. And I think it's hysterical. I think that the analogy only goes so far, but it is hysterical because the Russians are so proud of that history, and justifiably. But they tend to gloss over in their own history when they're talking about it, the non-Russian military aspects. They gloss over the fact that the German military was completely overextended, was completely out of supplies. Their supply line was trashed. And it wasn't trashed because of the Russian military. It was trashed because of the weather, the mud, limited supplies in general. They didn't have the depth of supplies. So yeah, if you didn't have any troops in front of them, if you didn't have any defensive lines, they would have just kept going. But to some extent, if you hadn't had these other factors that you didn't create, you still would have lost. And now your government, your military is dealing with those factors, attacking somebody else in their home. Sucks to be you. Also, looking back at World War II era things, in general, I got to say, Poland's probably looking at this and going, yeah, we're not so worried anymore. Poland is a very good military. They have a very high-tech military, very well-trained military. They are not, when you think of the Poles historically, you don't think of, at least in this modern era, meaning 1900s on, you don't tend to think of them as a military powerhouse. But these days, for their size, for how much they actually have of the military, extremely good, because they're the ones sitting there on the border looking at the Russians going, this could be bad. Just like the Germans in the 70s and 80s, their military, very good, because they're sitting there looking at the Russians, the Soviets in that case, going, they're right there. we can't slack off. We need to train hard. We need to be very professional. We need to have good equipment. We need to take care of it. Well, Poland is now that country, and the Germans slacked off. France slacked off. Most of the other countries on the continent slacked off. Poland went, oh shit, we better make sure we can hang on, because otherwise we're going to be dependent on them taking us back. That NATO is going to survive and reconquer our territory for us. So military is pretty good. And now they're watching Russia fail to take most of the Ukraine, or most of Ukraine. They've just taken the first major city. They have been on the outskirts of Kiev for days and days and days. Barely, if any, progress. They're watching their equipment break. They're watching the supply lines fail. They're watching the generals not display the skills that they're supposed to have. They're watching their troops behave like the amateurs they are. And if you're Poland, you got to be looking at this and going, we feel much better about our position now. This is, sucks for Ukraine, but we feel better about this, because now, even in the cold hard calculus of Russian math, the Russians are going to look at this and go, we couldn't handle Ukraine. We should have mopped the floor with them, right? We couldn't handle them. We really couldn't handle Poland, much less what NATO would send to support Poland, which means that we can't even just build ourselves back up to where we were before Ukraine if we want to invade Poland. We've got to now go way further. And they don't have the money for it. They don't have the will as a nation. That's not what they're interested in doing as a nation. Putin might be, some of his generals might be, but really, from a national point of view, Poland is not a priority. Like, taking Poland doesn't gain him a whole lot. And that means that math works out to Poland can really go, we're in good shape. But I will say this, I think it is critical that even though we're seeing what amounts to a master's class in Russian troops and hardware and how they can act, how they can function, you can't take it too far, because the doctrine has not been what you would expect. They have not kept their combined arms support system intact the way they're supposed to. That's how they train. That's how they're supposed to be doing it. And they're just not to the same degree we would expect. So trying to take solid lessons in that aspect and assuming that they would behave that way in another attack somewhere else, I think that is risky. You can't assume they're going to follow their main doctrine. That is one thing we've learned. So you have to assume that they may do something you didn't expect. Historically, you always knew what the Russians were going to do. That wasn't the problem. It was that they knew you knew, and they would just send enough troops to do the job anyway. If they can send 4 times more troops to any given spot, and they're doing that in multiple spots, and you can't redeploy your troops, it doesn't matter that they're doing it. You don't have enough troops to be strong everywhere they're sending attacks. On the other hand, now you have to go, okay, are they going to distribute these attacks everywhere and not have a main line of attack? Are they going to have a couple little spoiler attacks and then one big main line of attack? What are they going to do? We don't know, because they've thrown out their doctrine the first time we saw them fight a regular war in 50 years. So we just don't know. So I think it's important to, yes, we can look at how the equipment has responded, how has it worked, how well the radars worked, how well the missiles worked, issues with any tanks or other equipment, but you can't extrapolate that too far. Now, totally off topic. We'll stay political-ish. Masks in the US. We're not talking European or anything like that. It is hysterical to me seeing all the people freaking out that DeSantis in Florida told the kids behind him at a press conference, take off your mask. That's pointless. When even DC has admitted that it isn't important, that it doesn't matter. And even more, we're assuming those kids didn't have COVID, right? Like they weren't standing there with COVID. Well, right from the start, from basically day one, the CDC, Fauci, every hospital in the world, every doctor I know that is remotely competent has been very clear. They just might not have said it more than once, and they might have said it very quietly. The mask is not for the other person. Or sorry, the mask isn't for the person wearing it. It's for the other person. You wearing that paper mask is not protecting you from COVID. It's protecting somebody else if you have COVID and you cough or sneeze or spit or whatever, and it goes outward. Because the mask will catch. It will stop a lot of that. Not all of it, but it'll cut the distance down. It'll help a lot. But those masks aren't air sealed. They don't have a seal against your face to when you inhale. There's air coming around them in the top, and they aren't protecting you. They're protecting everybody else from you. Did we forget that somewhere along the way? I mean, I know we did as a general population. We just glossed that over because we got told we had to wear the masks, so we made the best of it. But as that kind of restriction, that requirement gets lifted, or in places like Texas where it hasn't been here for a long time, you got to remember what the mask is for. Now, I will say this. If you are a high-risk person, meaning you are somebody that really doesn't want to get COVID, it's more likely than not to be deadly for you. The mask doesn't hurt, but don't wear the same one for 3 weeks. In fact, you should probably be putting on a new one several times a day. If you're wearing it over the course of the day, you can't wear the same one. You need to throw those disposable masks out. If you want to wear something that is, reusable and cleanable, you get an actual, painting or asbestos cleanup mask, one of the 3M ones that seals to your face. It has a rubber system, and you look like an idiot, but it works. And you are both protecting somebody else and you're protecting yourself. They'll have replaceable filters and all that jazz. And you just occasionally see people wearing them. Those actually work. The paper mask is not to protect the person wearing it. It does a very poor job of that. In fact, in the medical field, they're generally treated as a spit guard and a splash guard. If you're doing surgery, you're leaning down over somebody. You don't drool into that body that you're working on. And if blood splatters, it doesn't get in your mouth. It doesn't get in your nose. You've got glasses on, probably a face shield. It doesn't get in your eyes. That's important. What it doesn't do is stop aerosol things from getting into your mouth or into your nose. Not particularly well. It's better than nothing as long as you replace it regularly, but not well. And I'm going to stop harping on that. But another thing that drives me nuts, and I'm sure it drives most people nuts, literally boggles my mind. I see people in their own personal vehicles with nobody else in the vehicle wearing a disposable mask, just driving around. They didn't just come out of somewhere and they forgot to take it off yet. Then when they get moving, they'll take it. No, they're cruising down the highway. I'm sorry. What are you doing? Wearing that mask when you don't need to be wearing that mask is more hazardous to your health, even if for some reason you think it has value in your own personal vehicle. If you're wearing that mask for an extended period of time, it is going to start growing bacteria. You are going to then inhale said bacteria. This is worse than not wearing a mask. And these are all things, I'm not making anything new. I'm not saying anything new. Like I'm not making this up. I'm not some genius. This is all things that even the CDC has said. This is things that over the course of this process, we have been told. And then they told us to not actually follow that and just do what they told us to do otherwise. It's very strange. Goes right along with, I heard an ad today on my way to a job that for a company that makes a product to clean surfaces in your home, business, whatever, and it keeps working. The whole benefit of this product over another product is that, wow, that's loud. Somebody's playing their music loud enough that it sounds, I can hear the lyrics in here. You wipe down the surface with this, and then for 24 hours, it's killing germs on that surface. It's not killing viruses. It was killing bacteria. They were very clear at multiple points in the ad, that it kills bacteria for up to 24 hours on contact, not viruses. At no point in the entire ad did they say it was a viricide. Nothing. No mention. Carefully, no mention of COVID. But, it was protect your business, protect your home, blah, blah, blah. Like, feed into the fear, right? I mean, they're absolutely capitalizing. But this product doesn't actually do you any good. Now, dealing with bacteria is never a bad thing. If you're going to clean the surface anyway, sure. But most of those products assume that they somehow stay liquid. Most people don't like that. They like to wipe that surface down and have it be dry. Most of us don't want chemicals on our surfaces in our home that we touch all the time because we don't want to taste it and we don't want it doing things to our hands. Yeah. Sorry, folks. Think this through. So don't get me wrong. I'm all for protecting yourself, whether it's, if you choose to wear a mask, if you choose to get all the vaccines and all the boosters, power to you, your choice. My problem is when people use them in ways that are not helpful, when people believe that what they're doing is going to be helpful and it isn't, when you're using something that is not helpful and insisting that other people use something that is not helpful, but meanwhile not suggesting products that are helpful. I have problems with that. So, not that anybody was watching, because I don't think a single person came in while I was talking about this. Last item. This is Bass Pro Shop XL Fluorocarbon, 15 pound. And I have not opened this yet. I have no experience with this line. However, this line is the same price as Basics. Hang on, it's going to be loud. That's interesting. That's very interesting. Be right back. Look familiar? There was the same kind of tape right there. Same kind of spool. Let me go grab a different line of stuff. Okay, so this is a better match. This is the back of a thing of Red Label. Okay. That's the back of the XL. Now, my Red Label is like 2 years old at this point, a year and a half old. But I'm sorry, they look like they were packaged in the same place, on the same equipment from the same supplier. Now, in case you weren't aware, there are only so many places that actually make fluorocarbon. So all the companies buy their actual material from only a few companies worldwide. The actual line is made a number of places, but they're adding, they add things to the line, they do coatings and so on. But that's very interesting because I wonder, this is $10, okay? This is $9.99. I wonder if this is Seaguar Red Label or some other Seaguar line redone. Just, new name. Because Bass Pro is not making their own fishing line. I wonder. And I plan to test it. I plan to put it on. My cat's being stupid. I plan to put it on the Formula Limited Edition because I have 15 pounds Seaguar on there. And I want to put the copolymer on there anyway. So for testing purposes, once I rip that line off, I can put this on there for a couple of trips and do a comparison. I'm not going to get into all the details of it, but I'll at least, castability, feel, knots, maybe some brake strength kind of stuff. But at 15 pound, it's hard for me to test that. I don't have equipment for that. But yeah, interesting, very interesting. I highly suspect this is Seaguar under another name. And if that's the case, that's great. Because that's one more option. If you're trying to buy locally, this can be tough to find. If you've got a Bass Pro near you, this is it. Easy. Interesting. I mean, even the package hooks. I mean, it's the same size box. It's the same type of box. The printing is different. Like the barcode on the bottom is not in the same place. But I mean, that's however you design your artwork, right? If it isn't Seaguar, somebody went to some effort to source the same spools, the same box work. That's interesting. I guess I should actually, take a feel, right? We're at 39 minutes. I got time. Yeah, honestly, that feels pretty good. It's got texture, it's got texture to it, like the basics, or even Red Label. But no complaints on that. Feels, I mean, you can see the stiffness. Boingy, boingy, boingy. Oh, you can't see that. I mean, man, can I get a... Yeah, sorry, guys. Anyway, I'll do a video on that. But it is pretty stiff. Let's a little memory test, shall we? My usual memory test, at least for basic stuff, just get a feel for it, is just wrap it around my finger, let it off. No, that's not bad at all. There's no, tight curly cue like you'll sometimes see. It is a fairly stiff line, but it's 15 pound. It's not, we're not talking 12 pound here or 8 pound or anything like that. I'm pleasantly surprised. I was not expecting that. And honestly, I just wanted to compare. I wanted to do hey, if you want another, 10 pound fluorocarbon, what's the other option? What else is there? There's a couple. But one thing to keep in mind, this is only 150 yards. The Seaguar is 200 yards for the basics. A 10 pound spool of Red Label is 200 yards. So it's not like they're doing you a huge favor with 150 yards of line for $10, because Seaguar is selling it to you direct for more in terms of the yardage. But would not surprise me at all to find out this is Red Label rebadged. I think the sales of Red Label have fallen off a lot, and it's a way to keep that product line running, and you're going to sell a lot of it. It is not uncommon for people who really aren't into it. They're not into this stuff, to go to a Bass Pro shop. You buy a new combo, you buy a new reel, whatever, and you say, hey, I need some line. What do you suggest? Well, depending on who you get at the counter, depending on what they're thinking when they're looking at you, they may say, hey, this is cheap, it's easy, it works, go for it. You're going to sell a lot of that. On price point alone, you're going to sell a lot of it. People that have to replace line all the time and aren't super picky, there you go. Certainly, I don't mind $10 line for a test, and all of quarter of a spool left for liters or something. But yeah, it doesn't bother me at all. If I use it for a few weeks, it's not the end of the world to pull it off and try something else. So I think we're going to call it there. We are 44 minutes in. Nobody is here watching. And I am tired. I had a long day. Would like to just chill. So take care, guys. Have fun. Stay safe. Hopefully this whole thing in Ukraine ends well. I would define well as Russia going back across their border and agreeing to stay there, and Ukraine, getting some help rebuilding, whether it's from Russia financially, equipment, whether it's joining the EU and getting help rebuilding, whether it's just international aid. They're going to have a lot of buildings, a lot of roads, a lot of people that need help rebuilding, a business, a home, a farm. Insurance helps, but say you're a nationally insured thing. I don't know how insurance works in Ukraine, but a lot of times war isn't covered, and even if it is, events like this tend to bankrupt insurance companies if they don't get bailed out to some extent. So I don't care about the insurance company itself, but I do care about the fact that if they simply run out of money, somebody is not getting the money they're supposed to get to help them rebuild. So, ciao, guys.